Windows are the weakest point of any shelter. You can reinforce every door with 3-in screws and heavy furniture. You can set up noise perimeters on every approach. You can black out every pane of glass so nobody sees your light. And none of it matters if the windows themselves are still what they were when the building was built. A 1/4 inch of glass that shatters from a thrown rock, that a boot kicks through in a single strike. And that stops exactly 0 projectiles of any kind traveling at any speed. A standard residential window isn't a barrier. It's a suggestion. It says, please don't come in this way, to anyone polite enough to use a door. And it says absolutely nothing to anyone who isn't. In a post-collapse environment where the threats escalate from opportunistic to deliberate, sprawl, and where a window isn't just a break-in vulnerability, but a potential firing port for someone who wants what's inside your shelter badly enough to shoot through the glass to get it, the window problem becomes urgent on a timeline most people don't anticipate. You don't think about hardening your windows until the night something comes through one. And by then you're reacting to a breach that a few hours of preparation could have prevented. The good news is that making a window functionally bulletproof, not in the military specification sense of stopping armor-piercing rifle rounds, but in the practical collapse sense of stopping handgun rounds, shotgun pellets, and improvised projectiles that represent 95% of the ballistic threats you'll actually face. Doesn't require ballistic glass Kevlar panels or any material you'd need to order from a specialty supplier. It requires understanding one principle and applying it with whatever is already in the room. The principle: projectile resistance is a function of mass, density, and depth. A bullet is a small, fast-moving object that penetrates materials by pushing through them. The more material it has to push through, the more energy it loses per inch of penetration. And the slower it gets, and at some point it either stops or exits the barrier with so little remaining energy that it's no longer lethal. You don't stop a bullet with one strong layer. You stop it with many layers that each steal a portion of its energy, until there's nothing left. This is how actual bulletproof glass works. It's not one thick sheet of super glass. It's multiple layers of glass and polycarbonate laminated together, so that each layer absorbs energy, deforms, and slows the projectile before passing it to the next layer. You're going to build the same thing from whatever the room contains. Method 1. The book wall. This is the fastest, most accessible, and most effective improvised ballistic barrier available. In any building that contains a bookshelf, a library, an office, or even a stack of magazines and newspapers, paper is a surprisingly effective ballistic material. Densely packed paper fibers absorb and redirect projectile energy through friction, deformation, and the sheer mass of compressed cellulose that the bullet has to displace to keep moving forward. A single hardcover book, roughly 1 inch thick, stops most small caliber handgun rounds, a standard 9mm round. The most common handgun caliber in civilian use penetrates approximately 8 to 10 inches of loosely stacked paper, or 4 to 6 inches of tightly packed books. Depending on the specific load and velocity, that means a stack of books 6 inches deep, 5 or 6 hard covers pressed tightly together, is a functional ballistic barrier against the most common handgun threat you'll face. The application is straightforward. Stack books tightly against the window from the inside, filling the entire window opening from sill to frame top. Pack them spine out, so the hardcovers face the threat direction, and the pages provide the depth. Fill any gaps between books with folded magazines, newspapers, or fabric stuffed tight to eliminate channels that a projectile could follow between the books. The result is a wall of compressed paper 6 to 12 inches deep that blocks visual observation from outside, provides significant thermal insulation, and stops handgun rounds cold, while degrading shotgun pellets and rifle rounds enough to reduce their lethality, even if they don't stop completely. Every office building, every school, every library, every bookstore, and most homes contain enough books within a single floor. To armor every window in a room, a 4-shelf bookcase contains roughly 100 books, enough to fill 2 to 3 standard windows to bulletproof depth. And unlike sandbags or concrete blocks, books are already inside the building, already at the right height, and can be stacked by a single person in minutes, without any tools, any construction knowledge. Windows are not just weak points. They are the most exposed failure in any shelter. No matter how strong your doors are reinforced, no matter how silent your perimeter becomes, if the glass breaks, the barrier is gone in seconds. In real collapse scenarios, defense is not about perfection. It is about delay. Every second a threat is slowed down is a second you gain to react. That is why improvisation matters more than equipment, and why furniture becomes your first line of real defense. A mattress alone is not bulletproof. It is soft, flexible, and absorbs impact. But it cannot stop a projectile by itself. It needs structure behind it. It needs density to become meaningful protection. This is where composite defense begins. Hard materials absorb and break energy. Soft materials trap and slow fragments. Together, they create layered resistance. A system stronger than any single object alone. Remove drawers from a dresser or desk. Fill them with dense objects like books, cans, or tiles. Each drawer becomes a solid block of resistance. Stacked together, they form a compact barrier that can resist far more force than empty furniture ever could. A single drawer filled with canned goods is extremely heavy. It becomes a dense metallic mass. Hard to move, hard to penetrate. When stacked, these drawers create a wall of inertia that absorbs impact before it reaches the window. Now place those filled drawers directly against the window. They act as the primary barrier, rigid, dense, and immovable. Any incoming force hits this first and loses energy instantly on contact. Then lean a mattress behind it, not as protection alone, but as a secondary energy trap. It catches fragments, absorbs shock waves, and stabilizes the entire structure in place. This hard-soft combination is critical. Hard layers break and weaken force. Soft layers absorb and stop residual energy. Together they create a multi-stage defense system, built entirely from household objects. And most importantly, it requires no special materials, no military equipment, no external supply chain, only what already exists inside the room, waiting to be transformed into protection. Composite defense is not about one material stopping everything. It is about distributing force across multiple layers. Each layer has a different job. Some break energy, some absorb it, and some simply slow it down enough to make it harmless. Hard materials behave differently under impact. They do not bend easily. Instead, they fracture and absorb energy in the breaking process. That fracture itself consumes force, reducing what passes through to the next layer. Soft materials work in the opposite way. They do not break suddenly. They deform, stretch, and slow motion through resistance. This stretching spreads the energy over time, reducing the peak force at any single point. Now combine both principles. Hard layer first, soft layer next, hard layer again. This is called a multi-stage energy trap. Each stage weakens the projectile further until nothing dangerous remains. A ceramic floor tile is especially important in this system because ceramics are extremely hard but brittle. They shatter on impact, and that shattering consumes massive amounts of energy instantly, turning force into fragments. But those fragments are still dangerous if uncontrolled. That is why a soft layer is placed behind it, to catch and trap the broken pieces, preventing secondary damage, and stabilizing the structure. Then another hard layer can be added, to repeat the process again. Force is broken multiple times in sequence, instead of one single point of failure. You create a chain of resistance. The key idea is not strength alone. It is energy management. Every layer takes a portion of force and passes a weaker version forward, until it can no longer do damage. This system works with whatever is available. Tiles from the bathroom, fabric from clothes, wood from furniture. Every object becomes part of a larger defensive structure when arranged correctly. And once again, no specialized tools are required. No factory-made armor, no external supply chain, only awareness of how materials behave and how to combine them into protection. Water is one of the most underestimated ballistic materials. People think of it as soft and harmless. But in physics, water is extremely dense under sudden impact. It resists movement with immediate force and slows projectiles far faster than air ever could. Unlike solid materials, water reacts differently on impact. It does not crack or shatter. Instead, it displaces and pushes back, creating resistance in every direction. This makes penetration extremely energy costly. A single container filled with water becomes a heavy barrier. Its weight alone adds stability, and its density creates constant resistance. Even small containers can become significant obstacles. When placed correctly in front of a window, when a projectile enters water, it immediately begins losing speed. Energy spreads outward into the liquid. Instead of moving forward in a straight path, it disperses and weakens rapidly. This is why pools are used in ballistic testing, because water consistently stops or reduces bullet velocity within a very short distance, far faster than most solid materials that people assume are stronger. A standard household trash bin filled with water can weigh over 100 pounds. That mass alone makes it stable and difficult to displace under force, turning it into a defensive barrier. Stacking multiple containers increases protection. Each layer adds depth of resistance and forces repeated energy loss until the projectile can no longer continue. This creates a simple but effective wall. Unlike solid barriers, water does not retain damage patterns. It resets instantly after impact, redistributing force evenly. This makes it consistent over time, even after multiple hits. However, weight becomes the main limitation. Water is extremely heavy and requires strong support surfaces, making it best suited for ground-level defense, where structural support is strongest. Even with limitations, water remains one of the fastest improvised barriers because it requires no construction, no shaping or cutting, only containment and immediate deployment when needed. Sand and soil are among the oldest defensive materials in human history. They have been used in warfare for centuries because they absorb and trap energy extremely effectively. Unlike rigid materials, they do not allow easy penetration. They stop force through mass and compression. When a bullet hits packed earth, it immediately begins losing energy. Particles shift and compress around it, slowing it down with extreme resistance until it eventually stops completely. The advantage of earth materials is availability. Soil exists everywhere around buildings, and sand can be collected from many environments, making it one of the most accessible barriers. In any survival situation, any container can become a sandbag. Plastic bags, cloth, cardboard boxes, even drawers or buckets can be used. Once filled and packed tightly, they become solid defensive blocks. 6 inches of packed sand can stop handgun rounds. 12 inches can stop many rifle rounds. And deeper layers increase resistance significantly because every additional inch absorbs more energy before it reaches the other side. Unlike smooth materials, sand creates chaotic resistance. Every grain shifts independently, forcing projectiles into unpredictable paths, which increases energy loss rapidly and reduces penetration efficiency. The limitation of sand is weight and transport. It is heavy and difficult to move in large amounts, especially from outside environments, which requires careful timing and planning. To avoid exposure during collection, despite its weight, sand remains unmatched in stopping power because it converts kinetic energy into friction instantly and traps projectiles inside its dense structure, making escape nearly impossible for high-speed objects. Once they enter the barrier, earth-based barriers also have structural stability. They do not degrade quickly after impact. Unlike brittle materials that crack, sand simply redistributes and absorbs again, maintaining its defensive integrity. When combined with household containers, sand becomes one of the most reliable improvised defenses, turning ordinary materials into serious protection without requiring engineering knowledge, only basic understanding of energy and mass. At this point, no single method is enough on its own. Real survival is not about one perfect barrier. It is about combining every available material into a layered system of resistance that works together as one structure. Every window becomes its own project. Each one requires a different solution, based on what is already inside the room. Books, water, furniture, or earth all become part of a defensive network. There is no universal design, only adaptation to environment. What you have determines what you build, and what you build determines how long you survive. In a hostile environment, a bookshelf becomes a barrier, a mattress becomes a shock absorber, a drawer becomes a solid block of mass, and water becomes a slowing field. Each object gains a new purpose. The key principle is layering. No single layer is expected to do everything. Each layer only performs one function. Together they form complete resistance. That multiplies effectiveness. Even imperfect materials become powerful when combined. Weak objects become strong in structure, because structure matters more than material alone. Arrangement defines resistance, not just strength. This is why preparation matters more than reaction. Once a breach happens, it is already too late. But before that moment, you control everything inside the room, including how it is defended. A shelter is not a building. It is a system of decisions, each object placed with intention, each layer designed to delay failure until survival becomes possible. Time becomes your most important resource. Every barrier adds seconds, and those seconds create opportunities to react, to move, to survive. That is the real function of defense. Because survival is not about stopping everything. It is about slowing danger enough to stay one step ahead of it, long enough to make your next decision and your next move. Once your barriers are built, the next layer is thinking. Defense is not static. It is dynamic. You must assume that every structure can fail, and every failure creates a new problem. That must be solved instantly. Angles matter more than strength. A barrier is only effective if it is positioned correctly. Even the strongest material can fail from a bad angle, because force always follows the path of least resistance. Position defines survival. Blind spots are the real danger. Not what you can see, but what you cannot. Every room has hidden vulnerabilities. Corners, reflections, and weak points that go unnoticed until it is too late. A good defense is never symmetrical. It is layered in unpredictable ways to prevent easy targeting from outside and to force delays in any breach attempt. Confusion becomes part of protection. Every object in the room must have dual purpose. If it cannot protect, it must delay. If it cannot delay, it must obstruct. Nothing should remain useless. In a survival environment, even failure becomes useful. A broken barrier still slows movement. A partially damaged structure still absorbs energy. Nothing in defense is completely wasted. Every layer contributes something. The goal is not perfection. The goal is delay under pressure, because delay creates decision time, and decision time creates survival chance. That is the core principle. You must always assume multiple threats, not a single direction of attack, but unpredictable movement from all sides, even through broken assumptions about safety. The strongest defense is awareness, not materials alone, because awareness determines response speed, and response speed determines outcome. In any critical moment, no system is ever complete. Every system must evolve with conditions. What works today may fail tomorrow. Adaptation is not optional. It is survival itself. A breach does not begin with force. It begins with testing. Small pressure points reveal weak areas that grow over time until failure occurs. Once a weak point is found, it becomes the target, because systems fail at their weakest link, not their strongest point. That is the rule of collapse. A smart defense anticipates failure points before they are exploited and reinforces them first, not after damage begins, but before pressure arrives. When pressure increases, systems compress, materials shift under force, and structure changes behavior, sometimes becoming stronger, sometimes collapsing instantly. The difference is preparation. Prepared systems absorb stress. Unprepared systems break immediately. There is no middle ground. In high-pressure survival situations, every second of resistance matters. Even partial resistance is valuable, because it changes timing, and timing changes outcomes. In critical scenarios, the purpose of defense is not to win. It is to survive long enough to make the next move possible. That is the only real objective. In collapse conditions, no barrier is permanent. No structure is invincible. Everything eventually fails under enough force. But time delays failure, and time is everything. Survival is not about stopping danger completely. It is about controlling exposure to it, reducing vulnerability step by step, until escape or response becomes possible. That is the real strategy. And in the end, everything returns to one principle: adapt, delay, and survive. Not with perfect systems, but with available ones, used intelligently under pressure.